Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello and welcome again to the Ideal Investor Show, and today with another awesome guest with something that is maybe a little bit unexpected, and that's partially what we want to do to diversify our content, bring great guests, and talk about some things that you should consider in the context of your investing portfolio. And so I love to thank you for coming and invite and welcome Matt to the show. Hi, Matt.
Thanks for having me on, Axel. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and doing this in the evening, your time in Australia. So a special thanks for extending your workday a little bit for us.
My pleasure. It's always a fun topic to talk about, isn't it? Investing.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, if people know me on the show and otherwise, that whenever it comes to anything that has to do with investing in money, I am basically a massive blabbermouth. So, podcast is just another vehicle for me to talk about the stuff I like to talk about and call it a professional thing. All right, cool. So before we dive deeper into it, Matt, tell us a little bit who you are, where you are, how did you get into what you're doing these days?
Yeah, well, so my background, and I should also mention my wife. So my wife and I are business partners. We've generated wealth quite differently to most people. I'm sure most of your listeners are probably into real estate and also presumably passive income. It's something talk about if we want to talk for hours, Axel. I love passive income. So Liz and I, my wife's called Liz, we've always been fascinated by passive income and also financial freedom. And so what we did many years ago, we decided on the vehicle of businesses, buying and selling businesses. So from day one, ever since we met, we've bought and sold businesses, typically manufacturing or wholesale import businesses. We didn't really do, real estate wasn't our thing. And as young entrepreneurs, that was 30 odd years ago. So I've been doing it for a while. So when we saw this thing called the internet coming along, we started to pay a lot of attention. And one day Liz said, hey, why don't we just do online businesses, what we've always done with bricks and mortar businesses, offline businesses. It's got to be easier and we don't need to do it with physical inventory. So we figured out how to buy and sell online businesses before any brokers existed. We just literally cold called people with websites, emailed them, typically in America. So we're here in Australia. So we did it in the evenings. We just did this part-time and we would buy and sell online businesses. And that's how we started. And what we did, because our background was manufacturing businesses, we did something also very differently, even in that field. We never did e-commerce. So, you see these Amazon businesses and what's called e-commerce businesses. We never sold physical inventory at all because we couldn't, because we're here in Australia. We wanted to get to America. So we've always bought and sold advertising websites. So they're very profitable, very high cash flow machines, but they're semi-passive. So you can work on them part-time. So for us, that kind of became our alternative to real estate. And we're very successful at it. We had a lot of experience already buying and selling bricks and mortar businesses. We found it a lot easier online. So these days, of course, now we teach people what we do.
Very cool. You're the first person, you and your wife, when you just made it sound like, well, we didn't really know quite what to do, so why not buying business? Is there like a story before the story?
Yeah. So it's probably a bit, it's a bit long, a good pickup. Liz and I live very strongly by intention. And so we were always fascinated by financial freedom. And for Liz, it was all about time freedom. She wanted to be able to live and work whenever she wanted. So both of us come from rural Australia. So when we met, we realized we had similar goals. Now, I wanted financial freedom. I come from a poor background, grew up with no money, watched mum and dad in the 80s nearly go bankrupt with a farm because of high interest rates, things like that. So I wanted financial freedom. I didn't want to be constrained at all. We kind of figured out very early, luckily, you had to do it through business. And we love business. But interestingly enough, we met studying zoology, would you believe? We were talking of Australia, studying red kangaroos. And we
Oh, cool.
realized we had this goal. And what happened, Axel, we thought Liz thought by doing zoology, she would be able to work in the country and,
Mhm.
have this great lifestyle, out studying kangaroos and stuff. But nothing could be further from the truth, because you're at the whim of the government. When you work in zoology, it's always government funding. You're just going to be poor. So I luckily said to her, hey, I've always wanted my own business. That's how I want to get. I don't want to work 9 to 5. I can't stand it. And she was the same. So neither of us have ever worked. And we just, both of us agreed on one big thing, which is we wanted that time freedom and to be able to live wherever we wanted. And I guess, there was a book out that came out. Actually, it was a few years later after we bought our first business. But remember Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad? For
Yeah.
us, that was like, that just turned on the light bulbs of what we were doing. So by then we'd already bought a couple of businesses. But when that book came out in the late 90s, we just went, okay, we're on the right path here. That is a really good book, because he talks about buying semi-passive businesses, or businesses that give you leverage where you don't have to work 9 to 5. And that was probably our biggest driver. We didn't want to work 9 to 5, and we wanted to get out of the city. So we wanted to be able to move back to the country. And like Robert Kiyosaki said all those years ago in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for your listeners, I'm sure they've read it, but he used to talk back then in the late 90s about buying laundromats and car washes and
Right.
things, so
Right.
that you get a rundown one, you fix it up, and then you put in a jockey to run it, or someone to run it. And to us, that's exactly what we were doing. And that, at the time, we were buying manufacturing or wholesale import businesses. And what that meant was they were very leveraged. We got our first business going so well that we only had to work in it a couple of days a week. It wasn't leveraged. You didn't have to work 9 to 5. You just had to get orders. And then we built up to the point where we were exporting to Germany and to America. Now that was tough though. It sounds glamorous and great. It took many years to get to that. But with the internet, what happened was we suddenly realized this was our dream come true, in that there were no borders anymore. We were literally overnight in the American market. There was no exporting and signing papers and sticking physical inventory on a ship and all that sort of stuff. Literally, we bought a website, and the very next day we're earning money in America. And the money just turned up in the bank account. And we figured out how to renovate websites and basically improve them. So we just put ads on them, and we got more and more money for the ads. So we got higher payouts. We'd get direct advertisers on there. But the main thing for us was that we suddenly had this opportunity to just be in America overnight, 300 million people versus 30 million here in Australia. And and there's so many websites to buy. We just looked for rundown websites. It's exactly like what we used to do with businesses. We used to buy rundown businesses, fix them up, and then sell them for a higher price or make more cash flow. And so we just did exactly the same with websites.
Okay, yeah, very cool. And I appreciate that. And for the listeners, Matt and I did not arrange up front that we use the same language with time freedom and time freedom point and financial
No.
independence and stuff. It's just, in a way, ultimately, those are strong motivators for both people who want to retire early, which is kind of like the subtitle of
Yep.
our show, as well as people in general. I think to say, okay, do I really want to work in some sort of an employment similar thing for the rest of my life? What do I want to do? What kind of level of freedom do I want to have? So I think there's a great amount of alignment with what you just said. So let's jump very quick, if you don't mind, Matt. You said, okay, so we are buying websites. Can you expand a little bit? Why would somebody have, like, quote unquote, a fixer-upper website, and what kind of money is involved?
Almost exactly the situation you described, Axel. It is lots of websites out there. People will own them for many years. Specific websites we love to buy, or our favorite ones, are ones that are passion sites. So we call them passion sites. So someone's passionate about a topic like golfing or guitar or travel or cooking or losing weight or how to get rich or something like that. And they start these websites, so it's around their passion. And exactly what you said, they run them for many years. They do okay. They make a few bucks off, but they don't really ever renovate them properly or optimize them. And then they get bored and they move on, or they own multiple websites maybe, and they've got much bigger sites, so they just sell off the smaller ones. But typically the sites aren't optimized that well because they're passive. They do well. They make $1,000 a month, like clockwork, or they make 4 or 5 grand a month, and that's pretty cool. And so what happens is we come along and we look for the ones that are kind of a bit neglected. We call them a diamond in the rough. They're sitting there. They don't look anything special online, but literally you get them and we polish them up like a diamond. And next thing you know, we've doubled them or something like that. And so that's the real opportunity. And I can share a great example. We had awesome clients on our program called Dave and Connor, father and son team. Now, David made his money. He's American, made his money in commercial real estate, so buying commercial properties where he'd get, I think he said to me about an 8% yield or whatever it was.
Yeah, right.
And so he's used to doing multi-million-dollar deals in that space. He did our course, and anyway, he found a pet website for sale that had been neglected. It was 14 years old. This owner was making $300,000 a year net off this website. It was about pets. 300 grand, that's US. That's a lot of money, but it was passive or semi-passive. So he had a few writers that wrote it. He started it himself 14 years ago, and he just had some basic ads on there, and he was making that sort of money. So Dave bought it for $1 million. So what's called a 3 times multiple. So 3 times the 300,000. So just like a normal business. Bought it for $1 million. He and his son fixed it up. They tidied up the articles. But you know what they did? The main thing they did was fix up the ads, because that side had been neglected because the previous owner, understandably, he thought it was pretty nice passive income, 300 grand a year. It's a lot of money passively. Yeah. So Dave, though, the new owners, they straight away changed the ads that were on there. They got much better advertising deals. The pet industry is massive, absolutely massive. And they doubled it in less than 6 months. It went to $600,000. So that then valued it at more than around $2.5 million. And like Dave said to me, mind blowing to him, just to see that cash flow, that's net cash flow coming into the bank account, 600 grand. He goes, Matt, you don't get that with commercial property. Now, it is a business. Obviously, there's more risk. But his point was it was still semi-passive. He didn't work on it every day. The main things they did was changing this advertising, but it had been neglected. It had just been left to run, as it was. And it was a successful site, pretty amazing outcome. And so what we're looking for is those sorts of sites. Now, if you're listening to this, we don't recommend you start with a $1 million website. That'd be really silly. You got to learn a few things and you need a team and all that sort of stuff. There's obviously more to it than just, you do need a team to run it. What we recommend is, so the good news here is you can start out quite small. So you can buy websites under $5,000 to learn on, or under $50,000. You can't do that with a traditional bricks and mortar business either, by the way. If you want to do this as a side hustle and you want to learn how to do this part-time, that's the other great thing for beginners in this field is it's not like bricks and mortar world where you typically got to spend 6 figures like what Dave's used to doing. You can buy really good websites for under $10,000, around $5,000. Again, that have been neglected or just left. People are bored with them. And there's so many websites out there. So when you know what you're looking for, the opportunities are literally in front of your face. And Axel, you want to know the amazing thing? I'm not allowed to say the name of the website, but seriously, if you saw that website, you would be totally shocked. It does not look anything particularly flash. It is just a standard blog about pets. Yet it's $2.5 million.
One thing that I can imagine, even though, I have no experience in this. Yes, we have websites, obviously, for our businesses and recommend I can't even imagine that you have a business these days without having some sort of web presence. Yeah. But on the other hand, I think it has, or I would not be surprised to say it depends a little bit on what kind of quote unquote niche you're actually in. And this is actually one thing I had been meaning to ask you anyway. There are obviously things where people establish from a business perspective, and I don't know any other word to use, I would say basically establish a reputation. What I'm kind of wondering still, and you're the expert, so I feel lucky I can ask you, you said he kind of stumbled upon, found it, and okay, that sounds like a great story, but if I were to sit here today without having you, Matt, available, I would say, okay, I wouldn't even have even the slightest clue to say, where do you find this kind of stuff,
Well, the good news is there's lots of brokers out there. So just like business brokers or real estate, agents, there are online business brokers. So the world's biggest one is called flipper.com. The reason I mentioned that particular site is that's a great spot to start if you're a beginner. One of the places where you can buy websites under $5,000 and they list them. And now, if you're listening to this, you don't just rush out there and buy the first website that you see because it's saying it's making $1,000 a month or whatever. You've got to know what you're looking at. And that's what we teach, why people come to us. We teach people, here's the sort of sites that you want to buy. Here's why you want to buy them. Here's how you do the due diligence on them. Here's the things you need to look up. Here's the opportunities that you're looking for, though. There's lots and lots of sites in lots and lots of different niches that you can buy. And we teach, what we do is we try and teach it in a simple way and the simple models that work for beginners when they're learning this. That's our specialty. We don't teach advanced strategies and things because you don't need to. You definitely need some knowledge to know what you're looking at. But once you've got it, it is a skill for life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same is true if somebody joins our mentoring program, after the year of being in the program and having bought anywhere between 1 and 3 properties. I always say you never know everything. I don't even claim for myself after almost 20 years to know everything that can happen in this context. But you are, from my perspective, what we are getting towards, always want to get towards, is you are in a safe environment. You know what you're doing. You're not hurting yourself, and that's probably what you guys are doing. Now, you mentioned, Matt, there are brokerages. In my world, brokerage means somebody has on their own made the decision to put something up for sale, right? And then the brokerage can basically go out and broker it, so to speak. Now, if for those that are not in a brokerage, those that have people who have a website, have a small business that is running online, can you describe how you, or are you going to teach people to say, just go out there and look for something? Is it what they're interested in, or is it what is kind of profitable? Right?
That's a really good question. What we do is we suggest people learn first on a very small site. So buy a website under $5,000. And the easiest way to do that is literally through a broker like Flipper or something like that, because there is a little bit of security there in that the deals are vetted to a degree. They check the traffic, they check the profit. So you're not necessarily getting bargains straight away, although we have plenty of clients that have bought amazing bargains on those brokerage firms. By the way, there's 20 to 30 brokerage firms around the world that sell websites, and that's all they do. And they do deals from, $5,000 up to 50 million, now up into the hundreds of millions. So there's one to suit any budget. But if you're starting out, you learn to buy a small one first, but then you're getting your skills up. Once you've got the digital skills, then you can start looking around on the internet yourself in certain vertical niches. So a really good example, one of my favorite examples, they're actually coaches of ours here at eBusiness Institute, and that is Nathan and Alexa. They're laptop lifestyles. They're a young couple. They started this idea. They learned off us how to buy and sell websites, and they own multiple websites. So they were living off a laptop, traveling around Europe. And they found, just by looking around, because you're asking, do you go into a niche you know about? Well, they found they love the gardening niche. Now, they'd already bought one side in the gardening niche, but they're not gardeners because they're living on a laptop. And then, they're living in Thailand and they're living in Europe, and they're young people. They're into gardening now, which is really interesting after buying a few websites. But one day they were researching the niche, doing what we call keyword research, just looking in the niche. And they noticed this site here in Australia that had been neglected, but it was ranking quite highly in Google. So they reached out to him. They just sent him a private email. So that's how they knew what they were looking for, because they could tell no one had posted onto this gardening blog for quite a few years, but it was still ranking well. They know the gardening niche was good. So they emailed him and he said, I'm not doing anything with it. I was just going to close it down, because he doesn't really make any money. So he sold it to them for $400. $400. That site now makes them $4,000 a month net, and so they've renovated. They had to spend money on it, but what it was like, again, it was probably about 10 years old. That's got to be the bargain of a century, $400. But they noticed that it had been neglected. So now they weren't experts on the gardening niche, but what they were experts on is they knew that if they bought that for $400, there's very little downside and lots of potential upside. And if they fix it up, so put new content on there. And so what they did is they employed 2 writers. You can hire virtual writers. They got them off a website called upwork.com, which is what we use all the time. You can find journalists on there. You can find experts. So they found 2 expert writers in the gardening niche. They now write the articles for that website, and they got direct sponsorship, and they put affiliate offers on there as well. So they recommend, gardening tools and things like that, and they get a commission for that. Plus there's ads on there. That site makes around $4,000. It's coming into spring now here in Australia. So it should hit around 80,000 visitors a month on that website. How we teach people. So that's how Liz and I made our money when we first got online, because there were none of these brokers. We would do exactly what Nathan and Alexa did, which is what we taught them, which is you look around for neglected sites. Once you know, as long as you've practiced and you know how to fix them up, then you buy them cheaply, negotiate a deal with the seller. Most sellers, if they haven't touched them for years, they're bored with them and they'll just sell them, and then you fix them up and you put your team on it. And so obviously you need a bit of a team, you need to know what you're doing, but that's a skill for life. So Nathan and Alexa now, they do this full time. They own multiple sites. They own 2 gardening sites, they own a crochet site. They started a site. One of their first sites that they bought was on cheese making, which they know nothing about. They bought that for $1,000 to learn on, and they sold it for $17,000. And that's when they knew, okay, this stuff works.
Right, understood. Yeah. And I have a few more questions now that you described a few things. But before we get into this, since you mentioned your program, can you tell us a little bit, like, how long is it? How much does it cost if somebody wants to actually enroll in it? Is it like a one-time thing, or is it like a longer term recurring thing?
No. It's just a one-off amount. But what we do is, if someone's interested, we have a free masterclass on our website where it goes for about 90 minutes. And at the end of that, we talk about our paid course. Basically, you can do our free masterclass where we show all these stories. You can actually see the websites that Nathan and Alexa bought. We show where we're buying them, how we're buying them, the sorts of strategies that we follow. And then basically what people do is they watch that masterclass, and if they decide it's for them, then they come on our course. And we don't do a membership type thing. It's just a one-off amount. And then basically we give people 5 years access to it. And then there's coaching with us and our coaches and things. So our successful students that have graduated through the course. And we've set it up like a part-time diploma. So that's what we studied here in Australia. You do a diploma in the evening. So most of our clients work full-time roles. They're in corporate or whatever.
Right.
They're typically working. So we've set it up so that you can, you just got to study it a couple of hours a week or something like that. Do an hour a week or something. And basically it's set up so that you can work through it over a period of about 12 months. Because there is a bit to learn.
Right. Yeah. So I was just about to ask, if somebody now has kind of done that diploma, are they then coming back to you and say, hey, Matt, okay, I understand now. I've done some searches. I have these 3 or 4 things that I found to get help from you guys?
Yeah, or from our coaches. So that's generally how it works. So, but we want to see that people are starting out buying small sites first. So they're learning themselves. So they're keeping safe. But typically the journey, it's not a get rich quick thing, because there's a big knowledge gap. That's what we mainly find. It's all well and good if you're listening to this. Don't rush out there. And I've said it multiple times. Don't just rush and buy out the first website you see, because I do say that because it is very exciting when you go on the flipper. You suddenly realize, like right now, there are over 300 websites listed on Flipper that net $10,000 a month. Now, for most people, that's quit their job time when they get to $10,000 a month.
Right.
But you would be silly to buy that if you didn't know what you're doing. You need a team. There's that knowledge gap first. So what we want people to do is stay safe. Just, build up your skills, practice hiring team members. That's probably the main thing, and learning the skills of what it takes to turn around a website and to renovate them. So they understand, if you're listening to this, these are businesses. They're not strictly passive. They're kind of semi-passive. So you can work, you don't have to work on them 9 to 5. You do need to be doing things on these. So therefore you want to buy a smaller site. So it doesn't matter if you make a few mistakes.
Very good. And let me run by you what I basically always use in our approach. And I think there is probably quite a bit of a similarity. I always encourage our mentoring clients to look at it as you are the CEO of a business.
Yep.
And as the CEO, if you start the business from scratch, initially, everybody has heard the story that you're basically wearing every head of every department that a normal business would ever have. Now, I'm assuming in your case, if you're buying an existing business, it may or may not have, but it definitely will require these different areas you mentioned, like people who write blog posts, people who know how to place the ads or do the social media stuff, or
Yep.
whatever, like do the layout and design and what have you. And I'm just making it up. I have no idea what the pieces
No,
are.
you're exactly right, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the context of being the CEO, what I'm always saying is you don't have to become a contractor. You don't have to become a
No.
bank. You don't have to become an insurance expert or stuff. You're the person who, even though they're not really in the traditional sense employees, but in the role of the CEO, you're basically putting the team together that works for you. And then your
Yep.
role, as you would expect the CEO, is to oversee that they do what you hired them for, and maybe strategize and visionize, or whatever the proper word for that is, where you want to take it or where it could go.
Yeah.
And I would assume that what people learn in your program is, how am I a CEO of a website business, so to speak?
Essentially, yes. So that's what Nathan and Alexa do. So we're big on getting people to set a vision for the website when they buy it. And obviously, you get better at that the more knowledge you get.
Yeah.
But basically, we suggest, look, when you buy a website, don't just sit on it, set a goal to double it. Okay, what does that look like? What does that take? What are the key parts? There's a lot of levers we can pull with a website to get that income up. And so that's what we teach, a variety of strategies that you can do, that you can focus on that. And then like Nathan and Alexa, they are literally like the CEOs of say they gardening side, they own a bunch of sites, but they are directing their team. They're saying, okay, you guys work on this side. The tech team need to fix up the technical side of the website. And they're kind of like the project managers of the whole thing. And so the effective time so they did an interview with us about this, the effective time that they spend on their more passive sites might be 1 week a year planning on it, and then they get the team to implement the plan. Now, on that gardening site, because they're really excited about it, all of it that I'm helping them with it, it's a very exciting site. It's taking off. They're putting more time into it themselves, so they've got more of their team members working on it.
All right. Before we end, Matt, I want to, because I wonder if I'm the only one or if our audience is thinking that too. And it's probably a little bit different. If you had a website that makes 300,000 a year, it's one thing to say, okay, somebody paid me basically for the next 3 years. But I would assume that people are not that in the cave, that they don't ask themselves, okay, so now I have all this money that I would have otherwise made in 3 years, and then what? Right? Like, I mean, the life typically, I would assume, is not just another 3 years in this one example, or if you go even to a site that makes $1,000 or $2,000 a month, that I would assume people have gotten used to, maybe not even thinking about it, just ends up happening in the bank account. But even then, if you say it's a 5x, right, or whatever, or it's a 10x, and you say, okay, well, so that's $12,000 a year, so I'm selling it for 50,000. Well, okay, so then theoretically you could say I got the money for the next 5 years. How does this look like? Are the owners basically turning around and say, now I have some money, I make a new one, or are they just happy that they made some money with it, or how does that look after the sale, basically?
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's a lot of different motivations and a lot of different people that own websites. But in our world, we do see now this is a big marketplace now, and we see a lot more people owning an actual portfolio of websites. So they typically don't just own one; they will own multiple websites. Why? Because it's so leveraged. You can use the same team on your little gardening site, on your big food blog, and etc. And these are great people to buy websites off, because typically they run with the big winners, or they're more passion sites. Say like Nathan and Alexa, they just love this gardening site. That's the big one that they want to run. They've got other sites that are sitting there passively. They'll sell off their smaller sites. And that's normally what happens. So as a beginner, you can come in and buy a pretty good website that's being sold off by someone that's experienced, because the people are constantly buying and selling these assets, just like real estate, though. Like professional real estate investors, I'm presuming they do the same as well. They don't always hold them. But really good question. We do find these days a lot more people own multiple websites as opposed to just one simple hobby site. Although the best buys are when you find someone that's set up one single, like that gentleman with the gardening site, and that was his passion. He got bored with it. A lot of people they just close them down. They don't even realize they can sell them for something. So they're the best ones to buy, but our clients end up owning a portfolio of websites, just like your clients would probably own a portfolio of real estate.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's always the goal, right? You want to have multiple
Yeah.
passive income. I call them little engines, right? And you
Yeah,
want to have
multiple streams of income. Yeah, little cash
streams,
cows,
yeah,
we
little
call them.
streams or little engines or whatever kind of analogy.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, especially in a case where somebody is appreciating a little bit of income but not really doing any work to it. I can see that a little easier. With a 300,000 a year income, I would probably miss it if it were me. So
Yeah. Well, that gentleman that sold that, he was probably just over it. He just wanted the money. He wanted $1 million.
Right.
So most of our clients, though, who are learning this are not buying $1 million websites. Typically,
Right.
they're buying websites under $100,000. And when they're starting out, they're probably buying more under $10,000. So they'll buy multiple sites in that sort of price range, be quite affordable. So that seems to work really well. And that was the other thing I was going to say. The beauty of having a portfolio is it's a safety thing as well, because some sites do get hit and can crash, not all the time, but if you've got a portfolio of sites, say half a dozen websites, also the opposite happens though. This is the really interesting. It's always the 80-20 rule. 20% of your websites will make you 80% of the money. So out of your portfolio, there'll be one or two sites that go like that. And you need a bit of a portfolio. Now, we do have clients that just have single sites and they do very well with them, like Dave and Connor with that big pet site. But generally, we teach people the safety of a portfolio because it's more that across a range of websites, one or two will accelerate somewhere over the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. And that's what you're looking for. And then what happens is when you get the big winners, you sell off the smaller ones and you focus on the big winners. That's basically how it works.
Okay, very cool. So if anybody listening and thinking, well, I think I might want to try this and diversify. In my case, we have 65% of our assets in residential real estate, which also means there are 35% for other stuff, like maybe what you're doing. So how do people get in touch? How do they get started if they're interested?
Yep. So they can, it's a mouthful. The name of our business where we teach this stuff is called ebusinessinstitute.com.au. If you Google my name, Matt Raad, R-A-A-D, you'll see also our other website, which is mattandlizraad.com. Or you can just go to either of those sites. And what I'd recommend is just sign up for our free masterclass. It's probably the easiest way because we go into a lot more detail than what Axel and I have been able to cover today. I think it's a very exciting area. It's a great skill, but we show sort of the skills that you need to learn to be able to do this properly. So yeah, you can just you can find us ebusinessinstitute.com.au.
Very good. And we obviously will put both the links into the show notes, as I always do at the end of a show. And I have two questions, one or two, depending on time, that I like to ask. And the first one for you I want to ask is, if you could meet anybody, who would it be and why?
That's easy. Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he was a big influence on my life, because he started with nothing and with the power of his mind completely changed his life and achieved all his goals. And that's what I think drove me all those years ago. I learned his story 20 or 30 odd years ago. I said, I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but not as a bodybuilder or a politician, but in business. And so I'd love to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger and say thank you for the books that he's written and sharing how he did it with just the power of his mind. He came to America with nothing, and he's not just world famous, but very wealthy man. But more importantly, achieved all his goals in each and every decade that he went into a different area of his life. And he's someone who have modeled myself on mindset-wise, very much so. So I like his, get stuff done attitude.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. And I love to hear somebody say this, especially from Australia, because oftentimes when I'm a guest on a show, I'm being asked, and I have mentioned Arnold so many times. Okay, 2 minutes. The last question is, if you had a time machine, where would you go and why?
Oh, it's too easy for me, because I'd go back to where it started for us, which is the GFC 2008. I'd buy up way more websites. I don't know. I would love to do that. I'd actually go to America and knowing what we know, gosh, but that's cheating, isn't it? It would be too easy. That would be really easy. But if I had the time machine, like based on Arnie, I would probably be like Arnie. I'd want to go to Santa Monica back in the 70s. Yeah, it would be an amazing place to visit there. And that time in America was a great time to get into real estate and business and things like that. Very exciting time in America. And I know that that's modern history, so it's not as exciting as maybe going back to Roman times or anything with your time machine. But honestly, like I love business. So I think, to me, I've always been fascinated by business. And America is the mecca of capitalism. You should definitely consider getting into your own business in some way. And it's a no-brainer to look at internet businesses. That would be my advice.
Right. And that's a nice closing the circle back to the 4 quadrants, right? Ultimately, you want to be in the right one.
You want to be in the right hand quadrant. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Matt, and hopefully we can do it again.
Axel.